Alright guys, Brian here with VetteSource, checking in this afternoon. What is today? Sunday. So, sitting around the house, taking care of business here, but I figured I got a few teardowns I need to keep getting through. And this would have been a good opportunity for me to show you guys the famous or infamous Atari dash cluster of the mid-1980s Corvettes. Now this cluster started in 1984 and ran all the way up to 89, and it was actually quite revolutionary for the time, considering that most cars up until 1982, 83, all you ever saw was analog type gauges. Now, in the 60s, you had gauges that were run with cable drive in the back that was a spring mechanism, clock spring type mechanism. If you haven't seen any of those, I think I've got a video, if I can find it, I'll link to it, about the older tachometers and things that were driven by gear driven. And then they moved to electronic circuit boards in the back, which would convert the signal from the transmissions into the mechanical needles, the analog needles that you see. But when the 84 Corvette came out, this was the cluster that came out. And I have to tell you, being a preteen of this era, this was an amazing cluster. You know, again, you had a lot of, even the critics and auto journalists kind of made fun of this, but it really was cool. They said it wasn't, I'm trying to remember, it wasn't sporty, it wasn't like driver centric, it was too gimmicky for them. But you know, for young men and women that grew up with video games in the dawn of video age era, this was just cool. This was like a crossover, if you will. Kind of one of the first crossovers, if you think about it, between cars and electronics. So now this cluster itself was, for the era, really a quite interesting electronic device. If you think about it, it was pretty complex, and it really looks complex. And the thing that was neat about it, this one doesn't work at all. That's probably more why I'm going to be going ahead and tearing it down. But this was a colored screen. So what was really interesting is we were used to LCD screens. Heck, we had LCD liquid crystal display watches for, I think Seiko started those back in the 60s, but I may be wrong. Somebody correct me if I've got that wrong. But so this used liquid crystal display technology and then basically just made it supercharged with the coloring. And what I'll show you when we take this apart is how they managed to make the liquid crystal colored, which is actually quite amusing if you think about it. They're the way they did this. Now, this cluster, of course, all the other manufacturers ended up following or offering their own variation of liquid crystal. In fact, I want to say Aston Martin, back in the 70s, they had a car called the Lagonda, which is a really cool looking car. If you've never seen one, go look at Aston Martin Lagonda. It looks like a wedge shape. It's bizarre. It almost looks like the cars you see in video games. I think, what's that new video game that came out? My son was telling me about, Cyberpunk or something. That's got these really weird shaped, bullet-shaped cars, or kind of a wedge shape. But the Aston Martin Lagonda had CRT liquid crystal displays all throughout. It was really cool. So the Corvette stepped it up with this cluster, which, like I said, for me, this is probably the coolest feature of the 84 to 89 Corvettes, is this cluster and the displays, the telltales that you can do. Now, basically, from left to right, what you've got here, obviously your stack up, is you've got your miles per hour, kilometers per hour. You can see your graph right there, which to me was the coolest part of this whole thing. You've got your oil pressure, your oil temperature right here, your range and your trip, your fuel marker, and your coolant temperature. And then here you had your average and instant fuel mileage, which, again, for speaking of this, you know, Cadillacs had this kind of feature functionality, so did Lincolns, but this kind of stepped it up to a whole new level. Then over here you had your interesting little tachometer reading, where it would come and do your red line. And you can see here, this is a tune port injection era car, so you've got the red line starting at 5,000. So remember, we've talked about tune ports before and how they don't have a higher RPM range. And then you've got this. The upshift light was actually built into this. This is from, you know, I don't remember. I think this car was an automatic car, but somehow this may have been a 4-speed cluster car. Got to be here, because I don't remember. I don't think the automatic cars had that indicator there in that corner. But what happened was a lot of the manufacturers followed in GM's or Corvette's lead on this, and they had their own offerings of liquid crystal displays and colorized displays. And then the industry, all of a sudden, after 5 or 6 years, kind of abandoned it and started going back to analog displays. In fact, the 90 and up Corvettes have a half liquid crystal, half analog display, like what's in the LT4 car here, right here. So, but then amazingly, we get back into what do I want to say? Probably 2010s, the first part of the 2010s, and now we're back to full-on computerized displays. Hell, the new Corvette has a freaking Apple iPad sticking out of the front of the dash staring at you. So it's interesting how we've come full circle in 35 years on these clusters. But today what I'm going to do real quick, I've talked enough. I can see I've been talking for 6 minutes or so. I'm going to go ahead and flip this, and I'm going to show you guys how this comes apart and what's in here and what makes this unit do what it does. So I've taken, this thing has a crazy inordinate amount of screws in it. I've already taken a bunch of them out, and because I lost my proper size socket to take these out with, I had to kind of pull them out with my little pliers there. So, oh, but the one thing, let me start off with before I get to this. So the thing about this was, the thing that goes wrong with these over the years, you can actually see it on this screen. This cluster is essentially just a television screen. That's all it is. It's a television screen, and it has what's called polarizing film over the glass lenses. There's 3 glass lenses here. There's one here, there's one here, and there's one here, right? And what happens is the polarizing film fades, and that's why you can see this coloration behind it. You should not be able to see this coloration when your car is turned off. If you see this, this means that the polarizing film has lost its tint, its black tint, and that's why what it appears to be is the colors are bleeding through, but what it means is it's just not polarizing and it's not producing that effect that it's supposed to. So this is a common feature because the cars will sit in the sunlight, will hit them over the years, and it'll wear these out. So that's what's happened to this one. And of course, it's probably got a bad circuit board because when I put my tester on it, I can't even get it to do anything. So let's go ahead, let me put the camera here so you guys can kind of watch and see what I'm doing. Let me see if I got enough angle so you guys can see this. Let's see here. So, okay, so I've already got this back off. For some reason, of course, your back on here is metal. I think they used a metal with these these vents to dissipate heat, because this unit does generate a lot of heat. So we'll put that to the side. Now you can see here, looking at this, I'm gonna go ahead and walk over with this. You can see there's a lot going on in this circuit board. Now, if you watched my video last week of the C5 AC controller, which has a lot of problems of its own, it was fairly simple. This is a fairly complex piece of electronics. Now, again, consider this is very late 70s, early 80s tech, and they really did a job putting this together. It's a very stout piece. Like I said, it's got a lot going on in it, you know, capacitors, and you can tell a lot of thought process was put into this. So it's actually quite cool. Now what we're going to do is, first off, there's only 2 circuit boards in this whole piece. So this is your back one here. This is basically what would be your logic board. And I've already got all the screws out. So the screws are actually placed in here along the perimeter through here, right? So we pull those out, right? And this is your main input to where everything comes in. So all I'm going to do is I'm pulling this out right here, and it's actually, I'm going to show you real quick. Oh, I forgot to do that. Let's do that real quick. So you can see the pinouts right here from the main board just piggyback into this side of the board here. And looking at this close up, I can see some of the problems that are with this board. See how this has deteriorated over the years. This car sat out in the environment for quite a bit, so this circuit board is probably not very good at this point. But you can see, looking at it from this side, you can see how complex this piece of equipment is. There's a lot going on here. So anyway, that's your backboard, and of course, again, this is your inputs where your metrics from your inputs are coming in from the the oil pressure, the water temperature, the tachometer, speedometer, of course your fuel calculations coming from your computer. The other thing too is this is where the inputs come in and you change from the DIC panel. I did a video on pulling the DIC panel, Driver Information Center panel out of a Corvettes. I'll link up to there if you guys haven't seen that one before. But anyway, very neat piece, you know, like I said, kind of cool. And then of course, for some odd reason, what's interesting is they still used a mechanical odometer in this unit. So this is still back in the era where if you're being dishonest, you could really go in there and just kind of change them out. Now, the interesting thing about it is it actually plugs into that circuit board and receives its input from right there. See that little red input right there? See if I can get that to focus in. That's where that odometer hooks into that on that circuit board. So it's quite interesting. So it takes an electric signal, runs it to the stepper motor, converts it to obviously a time signature on how fast it's supposed to spin and calculate, and then spins the gears, and that's where you get your odometer reading. So you can see this car had about 135,000 on it, which wasn't a lot, but still. All right, so we come down to the inner board, which this is the one that's fun because this is where you'll be able to see what's going on here. So let me go ahead and get this out real quick. I'm trying to watch through the camera, and that's not helping me. And of course, like I said, I lost my socket. This is, I think this is a 7/32 if I remember correctly. So this is how they made this colorized. And it's actually quite unique the way they did this. I'll give them this. I never would have thought of it. And I'm not a huge electronics guy. So if this is something that was common, I just wasn't aware of it. So I'm going to gently pull this off here. Sometimes it comes out easily, sometimes it doesn't. And of course, this can be done too if you're wanting to take your dash apart and fix it, you can. So, all right. There that goes. Okay, so circuit board's out. And what you'll see when we turn this over is you see these series of ribbons here, right? These gold plated. These are contact points. Oh, look at that. That thing is burned out right there. Yeah, that sucker's no good. Okay. So these are contact points. You see all these maps through here? Man, it's burned out everywhere. Anyway, so these actually are contact points to provide electricity to the individual liquid crystal circuits. And it does that through these little curious rubberized pieces of, or rubberized pieces, I should say. So I can get this one out. It may stick. But anyway, see this black line between here? That's what conducts the electricity, and then it's insulated on either side, and it provides an electrical charge to the LCD crystal, liquid crystal display piece that's underneath there. So let's go ahead. So we're really actually almost down to the bottom here. So let me show you what this thing does. Let's go ahead and we'll start with this one. We're going to pull this one out. Let's put this down. I need both hands. So we're going to pull this one out. Well, and this one will cooperate a little bit. So this is just the framework that holds this in place, okay? So underneath that, is okay. That's an insulator, that's right. I forgot those are there. And there's our diffuser right there. And then underneath there, there's our coloring. So let me show you what this thing looks like when we get it out of here. Now when you're doing this, you want to be slow and careful. Don't use, just use your hands. You put pry bars and stuff inside there, you're probably most likely going to break these lenses. And the lenses are a pain in the butt to get. So let's get this out of here. And we'll take that one out. And then you see these stuck, and I'll show you what these are attached to when we get this out. And this is what created your color in the dash. So, you know, I know a lot of people are confused. They think the liquid crystal is a colorized display in this, but it's not. The coloring comes simply from this. So it's quite amusing to me. It's unique the way they got this to work. So you can see here are our glass displays, right? So, and of course they're held in place with these little tiny pieces here. So what we're gonna do, see this one, let me go ahead and put the phone down again so that I can do this without breaking one of them. Because I do want these to survive because they're still good. Okay. So there is our, and you gotta be really careful with these guys because they're fragile. That's actually a glass sandwich with liquid crystal in the middle of them. So there it is, and that's what it looks like without that colorized display. Now you can see if I just go ahead and, oh, look at that. I'll show you in a second. And once I stick that back in there, there's my color. And then once I pull it out, it's removed, right? Now, this one here is damaged. See this, how it came up on the edges here? This one probably will not, I don't know. I'll have to look at this one. I don't know if I can save this one or not. But you can see looking on the edge here, see those multiple, let's see if I can grab the phone and get it to look a little better for me. There we go. You can see it's actually two separate pieces sandwiched there. And then of course there is that strip of insulators with the contact points there that energize or electrify that liquid crystal and make it light up in those certain figures and numbers, I should say. So let's see if this one will come out for me. I was going to try to show you real quick, and of course this one too is messed up on the back side. I need to look into that a little bit further and see what can be done. Okay, so you can see on here, let's see if this film will come off a little bit for me. Now you can buy this film, there it goes, from Amazon, wherever you like to buy stuff at. Okay. You can see it's starting to come off there in the corner. Now, most of this film will not come off this easy. It will take a little more effort, like with a heat gun on a lower setting. Let's see. I don't think it's going to come off any at all. So no. But you can see that that's where this film comes off. And then once you peel that film off and put a new piece of film on it, then you've got, these are going to work again. Now, I think, I don't know, I'm going to have to look into these a little bit further. These may be wasted. I may not be able to use these again for a rebuild, but we shall see. And then this one, of course, here. Let's see if I can get that to cooperate with me. Yeah. This one actually looks pretty nice. It's not bad. So it's not too bad. So, you know, this guy's was basically just a way for you to see the inner workings of this cluster. Like I said, I still think out of all the Corvette years, this is probably my favorite cluster out of all of them, just because I am a child of the 80s, and I thought it was cool when it first came out. So, but not too terribly hard to tear apart, you know, not even really that hard to dig into and fix it if you're handy with stuff for yourself. And of course, you see all we've got left is our case right there. So, AC Delco, of course, and I think AC Delco was the original manufacturers of this. I don't think they shipped this offshore because by 90 they were having a Japanese company make these clusters for them. I'm trying to remember. It's not Nippon Denso. Can't remember the name of the company it did off the top of my head. But if you guys like this video, maybe I'll go ahead and tear down a 90 through 96. Show you guys what's inside of those. Really not too much different than this. But thought I'd take that time to show you guys what this is all about and how it functions and how they got the cool stuff out of it. you know, by all means, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section. You guys can always call me. I know a lot of you have my phone number. It's my business phone attached to my hip at all times, like most self-employed people. So let me know what you think, and I'll catch up with you guys next week, man. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you then.